My guest today is a ghost hunter and paranormal investigator who writes for Skeptical Inquirer. He's a technician, mechanic, and former EMT who's worked on everything from cars and helicopters to hospital x-ray machines, developing a thorough understanding of technology and how it works, which he uses to shed light on the world of the paranormal. Like when he revealed that an alleged ghost communication device was just a flashing repackaged cat toy. He's an expert with a camera who's been hunting ghosts since the 90s, and gradually went from a full believer to a skeptic by rigorously testing paranormal claims with boots on the ground, hands-on experience. You can often find him as the token skeptic fielding questions at paranormal conferences, and today he'll be joining us to talk about how to do a paranormal investigation the right way. Without any further ado, I give you Kenny Biddle. How long have you been investigating paranormal phenomena?
That's probably there's a transition in the middle, but I was a ghost hunter back in the 90s. So about 97, that's when I really started. Always had an interest in ghosts and monsters and aliens and stuff like that. And then when I got a computer, my wife and I got married in 97. So we bought our first computer. That was our wedding gift to ourselves. Got on the internet and started looking around and found that there actually were groups, local groups that went out and investigated. And I'm using air quotes here, investigated hauntings and ghosts and stuff like that. So I joined a team and started going around with them. And then gradually over the years, and I would say probably around like 2006, 2007, I started my transition over to a more skeptical approach as opposed to the believer side, because I was a believer. I thought everything was pretty much real and I was looking for it. Actually, my gateway drug, if you will, was photography, because I really got involved in that. And the more I learned about photography, the more I realized all of these ghostly anomalies that people were getting, they were all camera mistakes. They were operator error. So that led into skepticism. And I actually found works by Ben Radford, Joe Nickell. I found Sharon Hill. And just those people actually really tugged me and brought me over to the more skeptical side. And then it grew my passion for learning and understanding things even more. So that's where I started, and pretty much here I am now.
Was there a tipping point or an aha moment when you were out investigating ghosts, looking through, dark buildings, and maybe a fellow investigator did or said something that just kind of clicked with you and you're like, hey, maybe there's something more psychological that's going on rather than, people seeing what they want to see rather than there actually being something paranormal?
There really wasn't one moment. It was, I would say, a slow transition where I began to realize, like, for example, the best example I can give you are orbs. So in ghost hunting, there are these anomalies called orbs, little balls of light in photographs. And it was alleged to be a ghost, a spirit. And you were lucky if you got them. That's when I started ghost hunting. You were lucky to get one. And then it suddenly became like everybody was getting these. Everyone, like all across not only the country, but the world. Anybody that was ghost hunting was getting these. And that was really what got me into photography, because I was like, why is something so rare actually so popular and plentiful? Like everyone's getting it. So why? And that led into some not only reading, but experimenting with different cameras, and seeing what could cause this anomaly. And I realized, wow, okay, like dust particles in the air, they're always there. You can see them in a sunbeam, on a nice sunny day coming in the window. I was like, wow, I wonder if that's it. And so, I mean, if there was an aha moment, that was probably it.
But I realized dust particles have always been around, though. Was it that the technology, the camera tech, changed to be able to capture the flash reflecting off of them? Or was there a specific technological shift that led to the increase?
It was the downsizing of cameras. As they became more compact, the flash got closer and closer to the lens. And you'll see that more with the old style. Like even when I used 110 cameras, which they were the popular choice when I was growing up. A 110 camera. It was a very long rectangular camera that you would put a flash cube on the top, sometimes. In the beginning, never got them. Never got any kind of orb anomaly. But over the years, especially when digital cameras came out, with the Sony Mavica, that was the first commercial digital camera that came out. And the flash and the lens were only about 2 inches apart. And the flash hitting any kind of dust particles right in front of the lens was creating this little blurry circle. And over time, over the years, they got more and more compact where, I mean, now when you look at your phone, the flash is maybe a 1/4 inch from the lens. So it's lighting up that area directly in front of the lens. And anything, dust particles, which are only like 6-7 inches maybe, or even tiny insects that get in front.
You're saying 6 or 7 inches away from the camera?
Yeah, from the lens. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, dust particles that are 6 or 7 inches away from the lens. That's directly in the path of both the flash and the reflected light that's coming back at the lens. So yes, you're going to get these little circles. Not all the time, but it became more common. And we see that. We see as the camera got smaller, the amount of orbs in a picture, or the amount of pictures with orbs, increased. Until now, you don't really see them as much because most people are taking pictures with their phones and not using a flash.
Is that just because the camera sensors have gotten better at night mode, so they don't need?
Well, the sensors are just really, really good. Much better than older digital cameras. You could take a small compact camera from like 5-10 years ago, and if you're in a low light situation, like if I'm just inside of a room like this with the light off, if I turn the ring light off, you'll get a horrible picture. But I guarantee
I know.
my phone will take a much brighter photo than that compact camera. And that's just, and without taking such a long exposure, and that's getting into more photography terminology there. But
yeah,
my compact camera, my old compact camera would have to take a photo for a few seconds to match the light quality of a cell phone camera that would take it in an instant. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, even just the cell phone cameras from a couple years ago, I remember in Thailand trying to take some night shots, and I had to, leave my shutter open for several seconds to really capture a crisp, nice shot of the city. And but in order to do that, I had to have the phone completely stable because any bump is going to cause everything to blur. Besides seeing, spirit orbs or light orbs reflecting off of stuff, are there any other phenomena that you see that are often attributed to ghosts? Like if you could kind of list off the top, 5 or 10, I know I asked you in a Facebook message this, but if you were to kind of go through those, how would you rank it just from investigations you've been on?
I would say that the next, probably the most common anymore, are what's called shadow figures. And that goes back into even not using a cell phone or camera phone, smartphone, whatever you want to call it, and just using your regular camera. There's a habit from ghost hunters to turn the flash off. I don't know why. I don't know what the reasoning is. Sometimes it's because they don't want to disturb other ghost hunters in the area, because
so that they don't capture the ghost orbs.
Yeah. So they turn the flash off, and now they're using different light because most of your digital cameras now, even though they have what's called an IR cut filter, which filters out a lot of the infrared light that the sensor can pick up, it still picks up infrared light. So you can actually use an infrared illuminator to light up a scene, but the camera is not designed for that. So it kind of screws up the focus. But you can use a very low light situation and take pictures. And I'm seeing that more and more where people are taking pictures with the lights off or just one light in another room. And it's just enough ambient light that you can see. The problem is it gets into that long exposure where you were just talking about, where the shutter has to stay open for a few seconds. And when that happens, if you have someone that's in the scene that's moving around, they become not only blurry, but oftentimes they become transparent because they are moving around on that scene and the camera is, pretty much staying stable. And that lets any ambient light in the area, it reflects off that person as they're moving around. But if they move off like 2 or 3 feet to the left, then there's light reflecting off of stuff that is behind them where they used to stand. I don't know if that's confusing or not.
It's sort of like the old double exposures where they would take a picture and then take another picture over it. And it's the light is hit from everything is hitting the camera twice.
Right. And that instead of doing a double exposure, it's a continuous exposure. So you're getting that effect. Imagine not only a double exposure, but like a triple or quadruple exposure, all on the same image. And you can do that pretty easy, especially if there's no light or very little light and someone is down the hall a little bit, there's not enough light reflecting off of them. So they're going to appear as a dark figure. And that's what's called a shadow figure. And I'm seeing that a lot more, especially because ghost hunters seem to like going to like old asylums, old hospitals, these abandoned buildings, historic buildings where there's nobody else around, but there's very long hallways, very big rooms, and it's very easy for someone to walk off by themselves and then get into a scene where someone's taking a photograph. And then all of a sudden you have a shadow figure.
And when you go on these ghost hunts, what would you say that the average group size is? Because, it sounds like there's a lot of people wandering around. Is this 3 or 4 close friends, or is it like, hey, 15 or 20 people, let's all go to a haunted house?
It depends on what kind of event you're going to. There's some groups that do it by themselves. They rent a place out, or they go to a private residence, which I don't recommend, but they go out to a place and they have the place to themselves. So you're talking about a private group that's maybe anywhere from like 5 people to 15 people, depending on the size of the location. And then you have your public events, which are pay to play kind of events where it's a historic place and they're offering a night of ghost hunting. And as long as you pay your $20, $30, $40 per person, you can go along. And those can be anywhere from 10 to 30 people, depending on the size. And that's not always, what they go by, the size of the location. Sometimes it's because if more people want to go, that's more revenue for the historic place, which I can understand because a lot of these historic places, especially now, these historic places really need money. So
it sounds though, as you increase the number of people, it sounds like the variables are growing almost exponentially, where, you have a ton of people making sounds, knocking things over, walking in front of cameras. And if you're not reviewing your footage instantly and being like, oh no, that was just Bob, he was over there walking past the camera. If you wait until you get home and all of a sudden you're like, well, what is this odd thing that I captured? I don't know when during the night. If you have 30 people walking around, that's a lot of potential interference with the ghost hunt.
Right.
Do you find when you go on solo hunts or hunts with like 1 or 2 other people or 3 or 4 other people, do you find that the number of seemingly strange phenomenon that you pick up decreases significantly?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
proportional to the size of the group.
Well, I mean, yeah, when you take in everyone's accounts, then yeah, it decreases almost to nothing. Maybe there will be 1 or 2 instances where it's like, all right, we heard a noise. I don't know what it is because it took place on the other side of the house or something. And by the time we got there, we couldn't find anything, which is not paranormal. It's not ghosts. It's just a noise. But yeah, I mean, you have so many people, 15, 20 people, especially when they don't know each other and they're all there for themselves. I mean, for a pay to play thing, yes, they're all there for themselves. They don't care about the other people. I mean, most of the time they're polite, but everyone's doing their own thing. And sometimes they're loud. Sometimes they walk around stomping their feet. They're trying to go up and down stairs without thinking about who's upstairs, who's downstairs, walking across floors, falling down, laughing. I mean, there's plenty of nights when, like 2 hours into it, you get those little micro groups that start giggling and they're just having fun and they're laughing at each other and they're playing jokes and they're getting louder and louder, which disturbs everyone else. But I mean, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, no one's put any kind of controls in place anyway. So none of the data that they're collecting is valid whatsoever if we really get down to it.
It's not scientific rigor.
There's no science going on at all. None. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about that except, yeah, there's no science going on. It's more like a hobby and like a thrill-seeking kind of hobby. That's about it.
But when you go about it, though, you take a more scientific approach, and I mean, it sounds like when you're actually approaching a claim, where someone says, "Hey, here's this paranormal thing that I captured," you'll go through and debunk it. When you go out on a ghost hunting expedition, then what steps do you take? What tools do you bring, and what kind of scientific procedures do you implement in order to help safeguard against false positives and in order to actually see if there is something? Because from what I've heard talking to you, you're not closed-minded and you used to believe it once. And if you found conclusive evidence, you would go where the evidence leads. So
absolutely.
What steps do you take to try to find it if it exists and at the same time guard yourself against false positives?
It really depends on the claims that are being made. Everything that I do is based on the claim. If I get like a general claim of, oh, we hear noises once in a while, or once in a while we see a light outside, there's not much I can do except, sit there for a couple hours and wait. But a lot of times, unfortunately, that's a waste of time. I need a more direct claim. Like the great example that I use is if someone says that they hear footsteps coming down the main stairs every night at 2 a.m., that's a testable claim. We can be there before 2 a.m. We can set up cameras. We can check next door. Is the house connected to anywhere else? I mean, that's a big thing when you have like row homes or you have twins. If the staircases are connected through the wall, you could have echo.
But twins, you mean like a duplex or something?
A duplex. Yeah. Well, a duplex, a twin out here, I don't know if it's the same. Duplex for us out here is more like a duplex is on top of each other, whereas a twin is two houses side by side connected. Okay. So that's what I mean. Like you have two houses that are connected through a middle wall, then the staircases are going to run in that middle wall. They usually do around here. So if someone's next door and they have a heavy foot going up the stairs, I can hear that. So that's something you want to look for. But again, it's a testable claim. So we can actually be there at 2 a.m. and have everything running, like video cameras, thermal camera, whatever we want to use to test the environment, and be there at 2 a.m. for these footsteps and see if it really happens. If this really happens, let's look and see what we have. Do we have video of it? Do we have audio? Was it temperature differences? Did we have a temperature drop and it's just thermal expansion going on because of the materials on the stairs? Is that happening? What happens if we do walk around upstairs? Once in a while, there was one case I worked on where a bedroom door would open by itself. And it actually turned out that the floors were so old, they would bow. And if somebody walked in the hallway and they hit a certain spot, it would bow the floor enough that the door would pop open. So it wasn't anything supernatural. We found a reason for it. We actually stumbled upon it. I mean, it was it was like walking around, like trying to figure it out, and somebody actually stepped on and you heard the creak, and then you heard the door pop open. So we did it again and again. And that's important too, repeatability. You need to be able to do it over and over again and say, yes, we did it like 10 times, and 10 times out of 10 times, it happened. It worked. We were able to cause it. So this is the cause.
What I've always found amazing on that note is that if you have a door that opens on its own, even from a non-paranormal perspective, there's, the term ghost doors or ghost cabinets, where if you're a cabinet maker or carpenter or whatever, and, there's doors that are opening on their own, you can either tighten the hinges or even take a little metal bar and kind of warp it just a little bit and put it back in. And it causes just enough resistance to where the door doesn't open or close on its own anymore. And I would think that if there was a ghost or a demon that has the power to open a door on its own, a tiny bit more friction or resistance wouldn't really hinder it, but apparently it does.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you start thinking about that, like the circumstance that you brought up. If a ghost or a demon has the ability to open a door, to apply pressure, physical force onto an object and make it move, why open a door? Why not do something better? Why not push a mouse, a computer mouse, push it around, click on it, type out. There's a keyboard here with very light keys. You can type out something. Type me a message. That would impress me.
But for the believers out there who say that the ghosts do communicate and that they use some type of radio, that you've got those little ghost detectors that will scan through the radio scanners. You've got things that'll like look at electromagnetic stuff. And then some people will hold a little pendulum, and if it like spins clockwise or counterclockwise, it's yes or no. One, have you tried any of those tools, and what has your success or failure rate been with them?
So with the tools of like a pendulum, like a Ouija board, dowsing rods. Yes, I've played with them. I have them. I played with them a few times. I also have testing equipment for them. The dowsing rods, I have a rig that was built by a friend of mine, Mitch Silverstein. He actually cut acrylic blocks that when you get a pair of dowsing rods now, they usually are in handles, like brass handles. You take it apart, you take brass handles, you lock it into these two bars. There's two acrylic bars, you lock in the handles. You actually tighten screws in to lock them in so they can't move. And then you put the rods back in the handles. So now you're almost holding a steering wheel with the rods pointed out. And that literally takes away your ability to manipulate them independently. So you can't go like this back and forth, which is the easiest way to make the rods go out and in.
But you're still holding it in your hands.
You're still holding it. Yeah.
Okay.
You're still holding.
So for the person who would say, you know, the psychic or whatever that would say, well, the only reason that it works is if you have to hold it because it takes your energy and infuses it into it. It's not like you're detaching it on a stand and just like, you know, moving that on a roller or something. No, you still hold the handles as you normally would. So that doesn't interfere at all. And that was taken into account when Mitch designed them. And you've tested these and.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've had that with me. I've had this rig with me for, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years now.
What types of things do you test for with it? Like what all do you search? I know some people can say like they can find water, but in terms of spiritual presences and stuff, how does that work?
That's really easy because they just stand there and just talk to it. They usually take the rods, hold them in their hands and say, show me yes and no. And they move. And usually yes is when they cross and then no is when they splay.
Do you have to hover them over like a demon doll or something? Or is it just if you're in the right place at the right time?
Nope. You can just stand there. And that's what I've seen. That's what I've observed users do, where they just stand there or they walk around. Usually they stand there in front of me and they swear that they can make them work. And as long as you give them a pair of rods without any controls on it, they do it in front of you. So it's like, all right. So to me, that means as long as you're holding the handles the same way you always do, even if they're locked in place, you should be able to get the rods to move.
So from the way that you're describing it, it sounds like all that you're doing, like they can still spin on their own back and forth. Yeah. And so, you know, spirit wouldn't be limited by that. All you're removing is the ideomotor effect where you're subconsciously not realizing that you're kind of altering or shifting your hands a little bit in and out.
Yes, absolutely. You're still holding it the same as normal and they swing freely. There's no hindrance of the rods at all. If the spirits are moving them or the energy, quote unquote, that's coming through you go into the rods, there is nothing hindering that. So we're not taking away any ability or power except for the power to manipulate. That's all we're taking away. And once that control is in place, no one has done it in the 5 or 6 years that I've used them. And I take them to paranormal conferences. I'm lucky enough to be able to set up at paranormal conferences a skeptic booth where I set up some of these testing devices and I invite people to come try it out. And so far, yeah, everyone has not been able to make the dowsing rods move.
Are you fairly well received there, or do most of them just think that you're cynical?
No, most of the time it's well received. I have a great relationship with most of the people that I interact with because I don't belittle them. I don't make fun of them. I'm not confrontational in an overly aggressive way, unless you're an a-hole.
Or if you're taking advantage of people.
Yes,
because from what I've seen, you know, I do debunking and stuff more at a meta level. So people like you who go out, you do the field work, you do the boots on the ground, and I try to amplify the results of that. You know, I'll go through and I'll read the research, but I'm not in a laboratory. I'm not, you know, doing scientific studies. I just know how to read. And so I'll take that and amplify it. But for you kind of on the ground, and for, you know, from what I've seen with the true believers who are there, everyone genuinely wants to know what's out there. You know, people are inherently curious and they want to know what's true. And so, you know, why would you or why would I want to belittle someone's curiosity? I think that that's absurd.
Right.
Now, for the psychic millionaires who are on TV who are using these tactics, you know, I'm getting a J or an M name, and they're using these mentalist statistics-based tactics, you know, like cold reading and hot reading and stuff. I'm a little bit harsher with them because they know what they're doing. And it's, if you watch enough of their footage, you see the patterns and you know exactly what's going on. And so, you know, in those cases, I'm a little bit more harsh and a little less forgiving. But for the average person who genuinely believes it, yeah, of course, there's no reason to belittle them.
Right. And being confrontational like that would get me nowhere. It would make no progress. I want to have a conversation. I want to be able to have a conversation and exchange ideas. I welcome questions. Every Friday night, I literally go on live for 2 hours and let people ask me paranormal questions, and I take them on directly. And same way at conferences, when I show up at events like that, either in a booth that they let me set up or just walking around, I welcome the conversation, because if I have some knowledge and they're curious, absolutely, I want to help out. I want to pass it along. And I think I have a great relationship and we get along so well is because not only don't I belittle or make fun of, but I don't just give them a one-word answer. I don't say, no, it's fake. I actually go into as much detail as I can on why something would be fake or why this was misunderstood.
Show, don't tell.
Yeah. You know, it's great. I mean, when we can actually do an experiment, especially when you're at a paranormal conference and we're talking about gadgets that they use, they all have the gadgets there. So we can actually like pick one up off a table and say, all right, let's see what happens when I do this. Or take a two-way radio here, go over there, you know, walk about 20 feet and key it up. And when they key it up and they see like this gadget light up in response to what they were doing, it solidifies it. It's almost mind-blowing. That light bulb goes on and you can see it over their head, because it's really nice. Because just hearing someone like me maybe go on and on about it on a podcast is one thing. But for them to participate and see it for themselves and see that they are causing it, it's a totally different thing. It makes it real for them. So that kind of approach is what I strive to do all the time.
I really like that you said that, because I used to be a young Earth creationist, and I thought evolution was a scam and the Earth is 6,000 years old and whatnot. And I wasn't necessarily distrustful of science in general, because I knew that, you know, I wasn't a moon landing denier or anything. I wasn't a flat earther. And I knew that it worked enough to be able to operate, you know, for smartphones to work consistently and computers to work consistently. And I loved gadgets and electronics and stuff. But whenever a scientist would just say something or assert something like, oh, this happened 5 million years ago, and I'm like, the Earth's not that old, my biggest frustration was that no one really explained why we know and how we know the things that we know. Because as soon as I started to learn that, it wasn't just this person of authority telling me that this is the way that it is, that, you know, where it's indistinguishable from religious dogma, and it's just, hey, here's two potential authorities that are both saying two different things. All of a sudden, one of them was able to back it up and say, this is the process, this is the method, this is the data that we gathered, this is how we tested, this is how we verified it, this is the result that we got. And once I was able to do that consistently in every different field and have overlapping evidence, and the other wasn't able to come up with a coherent theory that matched the data. And so I'm really glad that you take that approach at these conferences. And I one of these days, once COVID is over, I would love to tag along with you to one of these conferences. I want to pull back though real quick.
Sure.
To a minute ago, I was asking about the steps that you use to verify that you're actually getting signal and not noise. And when you're preparing to go on a ghost hunt, do you have a toolkit, a set of devices that you always make sure to bring with you each and every time?
Yeah, I have a bag. I have a good bag that I take with me, and I usually have a camera, a DSLR camera, good lens. I take pictures of everything. I take a 360 camera with me because I love being able to set that up in the middle of a room and taking a one-shot picture of everything from a good perspective, because it's usually eye level. So it's going to see everything almost like I see it. And then it's much easier to review later. I take an audio recorder.
Do you, real quick, when you're filming with that 3D camera and with your DSLR, do you have timestamps that are synced up so that if you see something on a DSLR, you can instantly verify with the 3D cam the exact same spot?
Everything's timestamped. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I can go down, I can reference everything. When I use digital recorders, I do the same thing. I go off my phone and the time is so-and-so, and that's the start of a recording. But even when I do a recorder like that, that's for notes. It's for what I see. If I have long descriptions, I usually talk into a recorder first. I take a notepad and pen because I like to take little notes, measurements, jot down little sketches of areas. If I see an issue, I draw a little sketch of it. I take a tape measure to measure distances, obviously, but between a potential witness and the event that they claim they saw, I like to see how far away it actually was, because we have a tendency to over or underestimate distances in high stress situations. So I like to get an accurate reading. I take a spirit level with me because sometimes the floor is not level. Sometimes steps aren't level. Doors aren't level. These kind of things can cause someone to be off balance and cause weird things with their head if they feel like they're off balance and they're constantly going to one side down a hallway. So it's nice to have a simple spirit level. Baby powder. I take a baby powder, and that comes up with different situations. Once I went to an event, it was an overnight event where they were going to practice table tipping because they had been told that a psychic had come in and did it with them, and they had phenomenal results. And the people that invited me to the next night that I was attending.
What do you mean when you say table tipping? Is it like a seance or?
Table tipping it's started back in Victorian times. It's kind of like a seance where everybody put their hands, their fingertips on a table, usually a round table, but it doesn't have to be. And you focus on the spirits and ask the spirits to move the table, to communicate through the table. So sometimes you'll hear knocks on the table, but often with table tipping, the table will actually like lift up, or like one end will lift up, or the whole thing will lift up and move around. Sometimes it rocks, goes back and forth, but it fell out of favor because it was one of those things where it was like, all right, people were doing seances and then they were doing slate writing and then table tipping. And it was just part of the evolution of spirit communication.
Was that because one thing or the other became discredited, or just because other things rose in popularity?
I think because one thing would become popular and then somebody else wanted to be the next big thing. So they would think of something else. And table tipping was one of those things.
Well, I remember, based off of your description, back in I think it was the 1860s, when the Fox sisters were kind of starting the whole spiritualism movement. They were cracking their toes. They could just crack their toes on command.
Right.
But they did it really loudly and abnormally so. And so they would ask a question to the spirits and be like, rap once for yes and twice for no. And then they're cracking their toes under the table. And two of the three of them came forward and confessed and said exactly how they did it, and that they regretted lying to people and starting this whole movement based around deception. And so it's interesting that you bring up that that's still a thing where people are listening for knocks and raps and on the table. And I know there was another guy got discredited for he was lifting his foot up on the table and lifting it with his foot.
Yeah, that's a common trick. Yeah. But I use the baby powder to go on top of the table so that you could not get a good grip. Because even with your fingertips, normal tables that they use are light enough that almost one-handed sometimes I can make a table lift up, go cockeyed like that, and then, or just lift one end just enough to do the trick that you just described and slide my foot underneath. Not even my whole foot, just the sole of the shoe where it sticks out a little bit on the side is enough to put some more pressure on the top and actually lift the table up a few inches. And then once somebody wants to go look underneath, you quickly slip your foot out and the table drops. And it's, amazing. But I poured baby powder all over the top of it so that everyone's fingers slid. And amazingly, we didn't have any activity that night. So that's always something I carry with me. I also carry it just in case I want to make sure nobody walks into a room or an area that I have set up, and I'll spread it on the floor, or even like on a door handle to make sure that no one's going into a room. Because if they get that, no matter how much, unless you actually wash your hands pretty well, you're going to smell like baby powder. You're going to get that powder on your hands. So we'll be able to see it.
Do you bring black lights or anything, or EMF readers? Or
I have a couple bottles of luminol. So I take that just in case. I haven't used it yet, but what
would you use it for?
To detect if there's blood.
Okay.
The presence of blood. It's not 100%, but it's like 99% when you do it right. And there was actually a museum that I went to that was a museum of haunted objects. And the claim was that a children's book had blood on it from a quadruple murder. And we didn't have any testing equipment for that. But when I looked under a microscope or a magnifying glass I used to look at the stains. I couldn't tell if it was blood, but I also saw a lot of fibers on it, and it actually looked like spaghetti sauce to me. Because I mean, it was a kid's book, so it was probably SpaghettiOs, but I don't know. I couldn't tell. But I keep luminol in my bag too, just in case. If that comes up again, I can test it at least and see what's going on. And then anything else that I would take with me is just depending on what the claims are. Any specific claims that come up, and I think, oh, you know what? I need this to test it, because every situation is different, and it really depends on what they tell me. And then I'll add stuff to my bag.
Are there any items that true believers will criticize you for not taking, or are there items that you take that they never do?
Most of the stuff that I listed, they don't. I have yet to see a ghost hunter bring a tape measure, a spirit level,
baby powder.
I also take baby wipes to wipe off to clean up the baby powder, because I like to clean up after myself. I don't just leave stuff in the house.
It's almost like there's a reason why you said earlier that they don't practice scientific rigor. Like all of this stuff, all of these things are safeguards against potential human interference rather than letting the spirits shine through.
You talked earlier about the ghost boxes, the radios and stuff that they use for communication. When I know there's one going to be in use, I take a Faraday box with me. It's a Faraday box, which I built. I made a wood frame and I covered it with several layers of aluminum foil and aluminum screening. And what that does is it blocks out radio waves. FM radio waves are pretty easy to block, but AM waves are very small, so they're very hard. That's why I have multiple layers around it. I wrapped it until I could actually put a radio inside of it. And as soon as I closed the lid, nothing at all. And then I tested it against some ghost hunting devices like a K2 meter and what's called a REM pod. The REM pod is based on the theremin musical device. It creates its own electromagnetic field, and if you disturb that field, it makes music, which is really cool when it's played for music, but not in ghost hunting. But those devices can be affected by two-way radios really easy from like 30, 40, 50 feet away. So I made sure my Faraday box could stop a signal when they were only about 6 inches apart, which to me was really good. I mean, every ghost hunting device.
For the ghost hunter who would say that, sure, you're blocking it from receiving any kind of radio waves from the outside, but the ghosts are relying on those radio waves to selectively pick words out and showcase what they're trying to tell you.
Well, then it goes back onto them because they are making the claim. And we know that if you make the claim, you have to back it up. It's not really up to me to debunk it. It's up to you to prove it. But when I do debunk things, it's because, I'm interested and I want to see what's going on. And I actually do the work that they should do.
And if they though remove the Faraday cage and play the recording and it says, danger, murder, get out, and all these things that are seeming hits to them, whether or not it's, pareidolia, audio pareidolia, where they're hearing things that aren't necessarily being said, or whether it's just confirmation bias and them trying to latch onto something and, maybe hearing the wrong thing in a message, power of suggestion, they would still say, hey, look, it said this, there's your evidence. What more do you want? How would you rebut that?
The best thing you can say is you explain exactly what they're using. The ghost box, which is what it's called, a ghost box or a spirit box, either name applies. They are radios. They are radio. That's it. They're radios, FM, AM radios. They're designed to pick up radio signals that we broadcast. So that means you're going to get snippets of the news, politics, religion, commercials, which include anything like names, furniture, date,
murder mysteries,
everything imaginable you can get off a radio. So yes, it's going to get all of those words without you asking a ghost to do it. You're still going to get it because that's what it does.
So it sounds like a control condition as you go to somewhere that's not haunted, where there's no, spiritual interference or anything. You run the thing, you get exactly the same result everywhere at any time you run it.
I'll tell you this, the next time the news comes on, do what they call as an EVP session. Ask the questions. What's your name? Where did you die? What year is it? What day is it? Just ask them during the course of the news broadcast. I guarantee you're going to get answers because all kinds of words.
Even if you fill the room with holy water and sage and all of the protections against evil spirits or good spirits or whatever, you're still going to have it come through?
You're still going to get it.
Sorry, that was a sarcastic softball question. I try not to go there with my interviews because I do want to take claims seriously and I do want to actually investigate and not just belittle. But when you approach this though, have you ever seen anything that you couldn't explain?
Sure. To give you a specific example might be hard because it's I've done so many, but I mean basically there's instances where somebody says something or says, hey, I saw a shadow down the end of the hall, and it's like, okay, if I wasn't there, I can speculate, but I can't explain it completely all the time because especially if it happened like a couple of days ago or weeks ago, whatever, the conditions have changed since then. So I'm not sure if I'm going to give you a good explanation. If something happened to me, I was at a place that's allegedly haunted in New Jersey called White Hill Mansion. My wife, me, and the tour guide, and we were walking through. We were in the basement. She was telling us stories about what's going on, and we heard a loud bang up on the floor above us. And it sounded like, something almost like you took a baseball bat and you slammed onto a table. It was pretty loud. And we were thinking maybe somebody walked in because it's off the beaten path, but if you wanted to get in, you could get in. So we went upstairs, looked around, couldn't find anything. I can't explain what happened, but that doesn't mean it's paranormal. It just means we don't know. That we don't know what happened. That's it.
Could have been a pigeon flying into the window.
Exactly. It could have been, they have a part of the house actually it's one floor that goes out underneath a whole bunch of trees. So a tree branch could have fallen down and hit the roof of that, and we would have heard it. But I don't know.
But see, that doesn't sound like things that you can't explain. Those are things that you can't explain conclusively. Like you have things that it could be, and you have hypotheses. Have you ever seen anything though that you're like, there's no possible explanation that I can think of scientifically, or for the most part, is everything pretty easy to at least have a possible natural logical explanation that's not just completely far-fetched?
Right. There has been no, in the way you phrase that, yes, there has been no instance where I'm baffled. Like I have nothing. Because you can speculate. We know enough about the environment. We know enough about what happens around houses, around abandoned houses. I grew up exploring abandoned places. That's what I did as a kid. And so I've had enough experience where I can give you maybe 2 or 3 possible explanations. And then if we have time, we'll start getting into it. We'll see if we can find it. We'll see if there's raccoons in the wall. We'll see if a branch fell on the roof. We'll go out upstairs and look out the window or climb up on the roof. Well, I won't do that anymore. I'm too old to do that stuff now. I'll get somebody else to do it. But you can speculate about almost anything. And the problem between like a ghost hunter speculating that it's a ghost and me speculating it's a branch that fell off a tree is that mine is a lot more plausible. I'm not invoking supernatural explanations or entities.
You're not making any extraordinary claim.
Exactly. I'm going with normal things that could actually happen, that has been done before, that's happened before. So we have to take those into consideration first before we even consider, like ghosts and demons and Bigfoot.
It's only once you rule out all of the things that, you kind of slowly shift through Occam's razor and you're like, this is the most likely. You don't have to make any crazy wild assumptions about the world that are unproven. But it couldn't be that because of this. Okay, we'll rule that out. What about the next thing? Couldn't be that because of this. Okay, well, the only thing we're left with is ghosts and the paranormal. There's no other reasonable explanation. But there's no point that you've kind of reached that end of your rope.
For me, that would be going beyond the possibilities, because if you rule out everything that you know, doesn't mean somebody else might know more. So that's where you have to go next. When you rule out everything and you're left with, I don't know, that's your conclusion. I don't know. That's it as far as you go. You can consult other people. You can find experts in different fields or have other investigators come over and rack through their brain to see what they can come up with. And if they're left with nothing, then it's still, I don't know. That's your conclusion. If somebody starts saying, well, if you don't know, and we've ruled out everything that we can figure out, it must be a ghost. No, that's a false conclusion, because now you're making up a conclusion. You're literally fabricating one to fit your narrative because that's what you believe it might be, so that you can't do that. I mean, they do, but you can't do that because
it's sort of like when someone says that there was a UFO, so it must be aliens. I'm like, well, if it must be aliens, by definition, it's not unidentified anymore. It becomes identified the second that you say we know conclusively, demonstrably that it's aliens. It might be, but until we prove that, it's just unidentified, and you have to say we don't know conclusively.
Yeah, exactly.
But still, while still being open-minded to the possibility, should the evidence meet the burden of proof?
Right. And this is what I preach. I mean, this is what I preach to the people that I interact with, the quote unquote believers. When we have conversations, I try to stress this as much as possible, that you can't use your belief as a conclusion. You have to have some kind of evidence to back it up. You have to have the data to back it up. If you don't, then you got to leave it at, I don't know, and just keep going.
But
if you can bring...
For a lot of new people, though, who are, they want to go on ghost hunts, they want to look, they want to explore, but they're not necessarily equipped with the same background because, you have a lot of technological experience with all kinds of mechanical devices. And so if someone says, hey, I captured a ghost on a camera, you can actually sit down with a screwdriver and take the camera apart and show them piece by piece what everything does and explain it to them. But most people don't have that technical knowledge or understanding or training. So if someone is just dipping their toes in and they don't know all of that, I was making a list of things commonly confused or mistaken for ghosts, and it's a long list. And some of them are things that I had never heard of before. And I've been, investigating paranormal stuff and kind of interested in science and skepticism and stuff for quite some time. I do this full time, and there's still so many things and possible explanations out there that are purely natural. So for the new person who's getting into this and they want to actually explore it for themselves, what would you recommend as a starting point? Would you just say, just trust the experts blindly until you become an expert yourself? Or is there like a starting book or website or somewhere that you would turn them to?
I would not trust the experts blindly. I don't trust anyone blindly. And that gets you into trouble because everyone can be wrong. We can all make mistakes, and you don't want to rely on it blindly for that.
But surely an expert opinion is going to be more reliable than some farmer who says that they got probed by an alien last Tuesday and they were on LSD.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to make sure I'm not cutting out experts. I mean, experts are really important. Yes. But don't follow blindly. That's my main point.
Try to understand why there's consensus.
Yeah. Understand. And if it's a good expert, they're going to explain to you why. Like you said, I can take apart a camera and show everyone the inner workings, but that's not always necessary. Sometimes it's only about setting up the shot again. Go back and do it again, because you might see the lighting is reflecting off of something, and it really doesn't have to do with the inner workings of the camera. Well, I mean, it does, but it's more important to show this is a reflection, not
the external factors at play.
Yeah. The external, yeah, exactly. You don't have to show them sensors and lenses and apertures and all that. You can show them the reflection. But for starting out, I would say don't stop learning. Like I always tell people, you never stop learning. You never do. Because I see beginners, they watch a few TV shows and they think they know it all. They watch it, they see the para celebrities and they think, oh, they know what they're doing because they're on TV. They're using this equipment. They're giving me explanations. Wow, that's great. I know everything now. I watched all 10 seasons of Ghost Hunters. I'm good to go. No, you're not, because TV shows makes a lot of mistakes, a lot. The reason I carry luminol is because I watched on an episode of Ghost Hunters where they tested for blood and they did it completely wrong. But if you didn't look it up, if you didn't look up the process, you would never know. And you would do it exactly how they did it, which is exactly how like the CSI drama TV does it, which is wrong. It's completely wrong. It's the science. No, they didn't have blood. They got something more icky. But just keep learning. Read books, not by ghost hunters, but read books by actual experts. Like I have several bookshelves like this behind me. I have several across the room, but I have actually two bookshelves that are nothing but photography books. And I've read through them all just to learn not only how digital cameras work and the effects that you can get, but how film cameras, how plate photography works. Studying the old stuff. You have to keep learning and not relying on celebrities to teach you. Books are a good start.
And that sounds like a lot of the stuff that you're mentioning with understanding the technology of it. It sounds like an encouragement for people to go back to the fundamentals and actually get an understanding, not just of, hey, I want to learn how to use this, ghost box to talk to the dead. Oh, hey, look, I learned and I got this signal. It's like, no, you need to go even more basic. Start understanding how radio waves work. Start understanding how sound works. Start, understanding how do these devices operate from a position of, what are the physical fundamentals, the scientific fundamentals, to understand how the world works. And there's so much overlap. And this is what I've been finding just since I started making videos, is that there might be things that you're like, oh, hey, I understand everything about the technology. There's no explanation. It's like, but do you understand everything about human psychology? Do you understand everything about the way that your brain plays tricks on you, the way that you misremember things, all of the cognitive biases and self-delusions and psychological things that can cause you to see things that aren't there, remember things that aren't there, and attribute too much, make statistical errors and whatnot. And if you don't understand that, and you don't understand the neuroscience and the psychology behind it, you can lead yourself astray. So it's not just one field, it's this overlap. And that's where I might kind of push back against this, don't trust the experts, is that I wouldn't trust one single expert, but generally if there are 1,000 experts in a particular field who've dedicated 40 years of their life studying the ins and outs and they know the fundamentals, and there's a consensus there, and they all swing the same way, and every time that it's challenged, the challenges are taken seriously, but then shown why they're not true, and experts in other fields that overlap come to the same conclusion for different reasons, then it starts to become much more convincing to me.
I totally agree. And I'm not arguing with you. I'm totally agree. And I'm right there with you. Again, the point I was trying to make was don't do it blindly. Don't just read like one article that quotes an expert and
don't be
say,
a sheeple.
Oh, okay. Yeah, don't just follow along, because we know headlines suck. Headlines are often misleading or embellishing.
Or even when they quote scientific articles, they misread what the actual study found and they'll sensationalize it.
Yes, and we see that a lot. And that's kind of where I'm going with don't trust blindly. Look into the expert that they used. See if they actually said that quote and see if the entire quote is there, because I've come across that a lot where quotes are taken out of context and they're used in the opposite context of what was originally meant. Even when I read papers, when I go through even scientific papers, not so much because I read those and that they make my head hurt, but I still read them. But if I read articles that are based off of the latest scientific paper that came out, I will do that. I will look up the scientist or the expert that they quoted and see, are they a real person? One, because sometimes I've come across that too, where it's totally fabricated expert. Find that expert, find their work, read their work, read the paper. The scientific papers can be really, really long-winded and boring, but it's worth it because it expands your knowledge of it. And I love that. I love understanding how something works or how they got, or the process by which they got to their conclusion. You summarized what I said before about getting down to the fundamentals, the basics of it. Yes. You see a lot of ghost hunters watch a TV show and then they pick up a device and think, oh, I know how to use this now. I saw it on TV. And they have no idea of the restrictions, the limitations, the flaws with this object. And they just go and use it and trust that whatever reading they get is true and there's nothing that can affect it. But once you start getting into it, once you start understanding how it works, how to use it properly, when you consult experts, as in like the manufacturers, the owner's manual, holy crap, read the owner's manual. There's a tip. But once you read all that usually includes flaws, known flaws, you get a better understanding and you can look for things. You can look for mistakes and anomalies and say, oh, you know what? I read about this. I know what this is.
You did a breakdown recently on that note of a nanny cam that seemed to capture a ghost, and based on our conversation, it sounds like it was just a shadow figure that walked in front of the camera, and they're like, oh no, our house is haunted. And you actually, one of the things I appreciated about your article is you went and you pulled up the specs of that specific Logitech cam, and on the manufacturer's own website, it said it can only really detect under ideal conditions without any objects, close to the camera reflecting infrared back. It can only detect at a maximum like 15 feet away.
Yeah.
And here it's trying to pick up across the room, and it's got this object right in front of the camera that's just reflecting light right back at it. And it's not ideal circumstances.
Right. And you wouldn't know that until you looked up the specs. And I mean, that's one of the first things I do when we talk about like photos or videos, anything like that, where people are asking me to look at evidence. I ask what equipment was used to capture it, because I need to know what I'm dealing with. And that's a perfect example.
What about camera batteries that suddenly go dead and people say, oh, the spirits don't want to be filmed or recorded and they're interfering with it? Do you get that a lot?
I do hear that a lot, not just with cameras, but any type of equipment. The thing that I want to bring up is I've never had that happen to me, because I don't keep track of my batteries, but I don't change them every investigation. And I know that a lot of ghost hunters that say they do, they don't, because I usually go with them from start to finish, and I'm there and I see that they pull the stuff out of the case and they just start using it. But batteries die. You leave them into a gadget. Some gadgets don't turn off. They're always on or in low power mode. So if you don't use something for a couple weeks or a couple months, yes, I can totally see you bringing it out and using it for like 15 minutes and it dying. Fresh batteries, sometimes you get bad batteries. It happens. But this whole claim that I went into a haunted house and all of a sudden my battery's drained, it's not as common as you would think. I don't see it a lot. Like, I don't see it like every investigation I go on. It happens maybe once every 4, 5, 6, maybe. And it only happens to one device. It doesn't happen to everything at the same time. That usually grows and evolves with each retelling. it just gets a little embellished each time it's told to a crowd. But I don't see any evidence for that. I've actually duplicated or replicated an experiment Ben Radford did, where he took a pack of batteries to a haunted location and set it up in the most haunted area of that location and said, here you go. These are full batteries. Go ahead, use them. He measured them before and after, and there was no drain whatsoever. And to me, that's not a completely controlled experiment. I mean, I don't know what else we could do, but I replicated it, did it to a couple places, took the batteries, measured them before and after, nothing. Because the hypothesis is that ghosts use the energy from the batteries to manifest themselves. So here you go. Here's packs of batteries. Go ahead, have at it. Whatever you need to do it.
So what you're telling me is that if I buy 50 voodoo dolls off of eBay, or not voodoo dolls, but those old kind of antique possessed, this one has a demon spirit, this one is a, whatever. And if I surround them with just a ring of car batteries and I start listening to those voice boxes or those ghost boxes, I shouldn't just hear an occasional word. This thing should just be going off the charts. It should be like a crowded room or a crowded restaurant. They just 50 of them all at once, chattering over each other.
That would drive me crazy. The ghost boxes are one of the most annoying things I've ever had to sit through.
Somehow I doubt though that the frequency of words popping through would really increase.
No.
You could do a controlled experiment though.
You could. I mean, you can set a lot of the newer models. They let you set the sweep speed, but it's still the same speed. It doesn't slow down. It doesn't speed up unless you do it. So you're not going to get any more or any less.
Well, I mean, you'd have to fix it to the same speed before and after as a control for sure.
Right. But yeah, I don't think, even if you put like 100 packs of batteries around it, my money says that you're not going to have an increase in activity. You're just going to be out a lot of money because you bought all these batteries.
And I actually, on the note of the batteries just dying, I do YouTube full time, so I have to film stuff and I have to use camera batteries quite a lot. And, also as someone who's been playing with tech since I was a kid, batteries, especially with lithium ion batteries, over time, they stop holding a charge as well. You know, if you have a battery that's, you know, you've had this phone or this camera for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it's not going to last as long as when you first got it. And sometimes if you drain the battery all the way to zero, and correct me if I'm off because I'm not the engineer here, but for the audience listening, if you drain a battery completely, then it's, at least with certain batteries, no longer able to hold as much of a charge afterwards. I believe it's with lithium ion batteries, unless I'm mistaken.
That I don't know about it.
Okay.
I'm not the guy to ask for that. I have had rechargeable batteries that I have drained down completely because I left the device on and it just completely drained it, and the batteries were done. They wouldn't hold a charge again. But other ones, I don't know if it's the brand or what, but others have recharged. But yeah, I mean, batteries over time, yeah, even rechargeables, they're not going to be 100%. They're going to dwindle down. The charge that they maintain is going to dwindle and get smaller and smaller until it's no good, until it falls.
And I think it varies depending on the chemistry of the battery itself, because there's different types of batteries that have,
temperature will have an effect. The amount of usage. I mean, if you're using something without any bells or whistles, then you're likely going to get a longer runtime. But if you turn every option on, you're going to get a lower. Or if you're
shooting in 4K versus 144p,
right? Of
course, you might have more battery life with 144p, but everything will look like a ghost because you're shooting with a potato.
And if you plug in like an illuminator or, you know, extra microphone, something like that are plugged in, then you're drawing more power on this. So yeah, you got to take all this stuff into account, and you got to make sure, hey, did I really put new batteries in it, or am I just saying that? You know, because that happens a lot, at least from my observations.
If you could leave our audience with kind of a final word or a final thing that you want to cover, what would it be?
Just never stop learning. I mean, that's really the basis of it all. That's where it all starts and where it all ends. You just keep learning. And one of the things that's just phenomenal about what I do for this part-time job / hobby / life quest in investigating paranormal claims is that it leads me down paths of knowledge that I never would have expected to go down. And I just get to learn about history and science and people from the 1900s, 1800s, and other countries, and laws and products, and how things are done, how things are interpreted. I mean, it goes on and on. And that is my passion. Like I didn't realize that until later in life, that just discovering these new things is fascinating. And it gives me a better understanding. And it lets me, in return, give a better understanding to other people that are looking for it. And so when people ask me questions, I can help them. I can either give them a good answer and give them references, give them the supporting data, or I can point them in the direction of somebody else that does know what they're doing. That just comes with years and years of learning. So there you go. Never stop learning.
Where can people find your work?
You can find me on Facebook, is where I post a lot of stuff. I have a blog called I Am Kenny Biddle on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram under the same name. You can find many of my articles on skepticalenquirer.com because I write a column for them. And I also have a YouTube channel under my name, Kenny Biddle, where I post a bunch of videos. There's a lot up there now. I think there's almost 100 videos of just going into claims or devices or methods, what have you. I try to get my hands dirty whenever I can.
I'll put links to everything below. Kenny, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure that all of our listeners will too.
Awesome. I like talking to you, man. I miss you. It was good to see you.
Yeah, we're going to have to catch up again sometime soon. Hopefully we'll either get you out to the Faithless Forum conference or I'll see you at SciCon.
Yeah. Hopefully once we're all allowed to travel again.
Once quarantine's over.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you go check out Kenny's work over at Skeptical Inquirer or on his YouTube channel. And make sure that you subscribe while you're over there. If you want to support my work, you can do so with a per video pledge on Patreon or a one-time donation on PayPal. Links to everything are below. Thank you so much for your support, and as always, dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Please like, share, and subscribe my video, guys!